that way we don't hijack any more of your evening than what's necessary. First of all, those of you on the webinar call this evening, thank you very much for taking the time to be here and to get a better feel and handle on how to use the automated seating program. Just real quick before we go on, I just want to take a real quick attendance just so I kind of have a track of exactly who's on the call with us. Before I do that, though, as a reminder, take a look at your phones and see if you have a mute option. That way you can leave your speakerphone or your phone that you're using on mute until you need to ask a question or maybe make a comment. That way we don't pick up any background noise during the actual instruction during the webinar. Just real quick, let's go by class. Just give me some kind of verbal verification that you're on the call. Starting with Class 1, District 1, Whitfield.
Yeah, we're here.
District 2, Seneca.
We're here.
District 3, Lawson.
We're here.
District 4, Brookfield.
We're here.
Class 2, District 1, St. John.
We're here.
District 2, John Burroughs.
We're here.
District 3, Bolivar.
Yes, we're here.
District 4, Excelsior.
Here.
Class 3, District 1, Farmington.
Here.
District 2, Fort Zumwalt North.
We're here.
District 3, Branson. District 3, Branson. District 4, Oak Park.
Oak Park's here.
Class 4, District 1, SLU.
We're here.
District 2, Francis Howell. District 2, Francis Howell. District 3, Nixa. District 3, Nixa. And District 4, Staley.
We're here.
We're here.
Okay, welcome everyone. First of all, on the phone call with us this evening, doing most of the instructional piece to the Auto Seed program is Shane Bennett from Trackwrestling. Shane is the individual with Track that really takes on the meat and potato part of making sure that our district tournaments are posted and ready for you to start setting up on Track. He's also very critical element in making sure all the district results gets transferred over to me into the state program to start working with that. So we appreciate Shane being on the phone call tonight. I spoke of this a little bit earlier, but today I sent an email out to all the district managers. Attached to that email was what was called a Track Wrestling Auto Seed User Guide. For those of you that have a copy of that with you this evening on the call, I want you to take a minute to look at that document. It's just a Word document that has basically 3 separate sections. The first section starts off with an area called seating meeting preparation. These are the crucial things that I think you need to make sure that are in place before you even walk into the room to hold your seating meeting on the Thursday that all seating meetings will take place on February the 11th. The second section of that document is titled Pre-Seating Protocol. Those are the steps that you need to make sure that you take specifically at each weight class. Basically, it just spells out how you need to communicate with coaches in regards to when to reveal the names of the wrestlers entered at each weight class, so on and so forth. Not going to insult anyone's intelligence on the call tonight. You guys can read through those steps for yourself. But I just thought that those are going to be handy for you to reflect upon the night of the seating meeting right before you start seating your first weight class. The third and final section of that document is the seating protocol. Those are the guidelines that we use to seed wrestlers at the district tournament. As you can see on that document, it talks about placement of seeds, consideration of the minimum number of matches in order to be a seeded wrestler, as well as the exception to that. And also it goes on, and lastly, on number 4, it talks about what Missouri's seeding criteria is. So first and foremost, the number 1 seeding criteria for district tournaments in Missouri is common opponents. And head-to-head, of course, head-to-head matches are only one piece of the common opponent criteria. Okay? So that's criteria number 1 that we're going to take a look at to see which wrestler is over another in regards to a seed for the district tournament. As you go and take a look at seeding criteria number 1, it's going to start giving you the different steps for how to use the automated seeding program when determining that common opponent or head-to-head criteria. If and when that you still have a tie after using common opponent and head-to-head criteria between wrestlers for determining a seed, at the very bottom of that document in red print is going to be what seeding criteria number 2 is, and that being returning state champion or place finisher at any weight class from any classification, meaning Class 1, Class 2, Class 3, Class 4, in the case there's a transfer student that may be wrestling in a different class than what they were in last year. Seeding criteria 3, returning district champion or runner-up in the same or adjacent weight class from any classification last year. And finally, if we still have a tie in a seed between 2 wrestlers or wrestlers, then of course we would move to seeding criteria number 4, which is a coach's vote. District managers, I will inform you that seeding criteria number 4, you should have representation from every school in your district at seeding meeting. Every school in your district gets 1 vote if it comes down to that coach's vote. But more specifically, let's talk about using the automated seeding program in regards to our seeding criteria number 1, dealing with common opponents and head-to-head competition. And at this time, Shane, I'm going to refer to you to get us started here.
Sure, you bet. Thank you, Greg. So I think we'll just get started. I'm already logged in. I know that some of the instructions may even kind of walk through that login process. Greg, do you think it's necessary to go through that?
Shane, can I stop you a minute?
Yeah, you bet.
Gentlemen, if I can have everyone's attention that's on the phone call right now, we've addressed this a couple of times, but you need to take a look at your phone, and you need to see if there's a mute option, because we're picking up background conversations right now, and it's very disruptive to the person leading the webinar.
All right, so I'll kind of move along here too. So Greg's right. So hopefully we can mute all those phones and everybody can hear, and we can move through this quickly and effectively. So I was saying, Greg, do you think I need to walk through the logging into the tournament process? I think everybody's probably there, right?
Everybody probably is, but I wouldn't assume that everyone has done that yet. So it would not be a bad option if you would just start from step 1, finding their tournament,
Sure.
And then logging in.
You bet. So if you hit, there's a couple ways. You should have received at least an email or 2. I think maybe you guys have gotten 2 in Missouri, but basically there's a direct link that'll kind of walk you or take you right into your tournament. But you can always come here to our home page and click this events link. And what that does is bring you to a search page. Again, most of you have been here or know how to get here when you're even searching results. But I can hit that search button, and in you guys' case, if you do MSHSAA, I like to weed it down and do just this season, but you wouldn't necessarily have to. Those are going to be date sorted. And then you can go through and find the event that is yours. I happen to be tonight working in this 4-4, so Class 4, District 4. Of course, you would go to your own. But if you click on it, a lot of you would go to view results from here. Of course, what you're going to do is in this user type box, click on it, go to administrator, and then you can enter your password here. And basically what that's going to do is log you right into your event as an administrator. So that kind of brings us to the point of where we're at. So I'm logged into Class 4, District 4. I've actually imported a few wrestlers just to kind of speed the process up. Once you're able to import from one team, obviously the process will be identical to the rest. So in tonight's presentation, we'll get a few wrestlers into a few weight classes. Not necessarily completely realistic there. Of course, you'll get all wrestlers from all weight classes.
Shane, just real quick before you go on.
You bet.
This is the screen that we're looking at right now that you'll see up on your initial login and entry to your tournament. You want to just tell them real quick why the school name Liberty would be showing up in red in the case they have school showing in red.
Sure. So you're seeing here is two columns which have hopefully the same team name in them. And we've gone through and checked this stuff. Truth is, you guys know your teams much better than we do. So it's one of the items that we sent out in that initial email. Check these to make sure that these are the same teams. But what we have here is a team name that was either typed in a lot of cases. In the case of your events, these were uploaded from a spreadsheet. So this is the team name that comes in. And what our system does then is it tries to match it to your season team. And your season team, of course, is that weight management OPC results season roster page that you guys have. So basically, Blue Springs is here. That was an easy match. The system is a character matching system, so there are times where you might see, in this case, Blue Springs South could get matched to Blue Springs. This looks good. You're going to notice that there's a red one here. The red just alerts you that there's a certain percentage, I believe it's 90%. There's a certain percentage or under of a character match. And so you'll notice that this was Liberty HS, this was Liberty in parentheses. So the system says, well, that's not, might not be the right team. Happens to be the right team in this case, but if I needed to change this and associate it with the right roster in the season, I could click this Get button. I could search for the correct team and click on it. Again, I won't do that because we know that's the right team. Red draws your attention to it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's incorrect or wrong. You'd want to look regardless of whether it's red or black. These all looked good to me when I went through, so hopefully you're not seeing anything in your events. If you are, feel free to go ahead and click this Get button, search, and then grab the right team by clicking it. And again, that's the link to the rosters, and that's a really important piece as we move forward from here. Anything else there, Greg, or was that kind of covering what we needed?
I don't think so. It's just been a popular question I've had asked in the past, about what's it mean when a team shows up in red, and I just thought it'd be a good time since we were all on the call, just go ahead and get that knocked out.
You bet. So again, it's a character matching thing. That the system is, it's all about numbers and letters. So it's saying that in this case it just wasn't a perfect match. Again, because it's red doesn't mean it's necessarily wrong. You just want to double check those. So that is the first step you'd want to do. So you'd want to make sure that these teams are all matched correctly. The next step is a really important one as well. Actually, we would bring the wrestlers in first, I guess. So we're gonna import those wrestlers. And the honest answer from me is that I'm not sure, Greg, where they see that list of the wrestlers they're bringing in. I know they know how to get there, and you certainly have communicated that to them. Do you want to touch on that at all as to how they're going to pick the wrestlers that they're going to be selecting?
They're going to import those wrestlers into the district tournament from each team's roster that's in the OPC. So you can, but specifically what our district managers have to do is they're going to have to use the district eligibility roster that they can view from our website in order to confirm what kids are actually eligible from a MSHSAA perspective to be entered in the district tournament. So they're going to use the district eligibility roster list from the MSHSAA website to know which names to check mark off the roster in the OPC for importing over into their team.
Gotcha. So once you have that list and you know which wrestlers are going to be imported in, it's as simple as coming to one of the teams. I will point out, and we get this question quite a bit, these are all listed as 1. What that really means is they're all tied for first because they all have 0 points. So once you start accumulating team points, then those change. But that number 1 over here, nothing to worry about at this point. But what I'll do is I'll click on one of these teams, and let's say I click on Rockhurst. You'll notice that you're going to see all of these unknowns, and that's just fine. That's kind of how we select one place per weight class per team. And then all I'll do is click this link right here that says click here to import team's roster. I click here, and what we're doing now is actually looking at the roster in the weight management system in the OPC. So this is a complete roster of that team. And what I would do is, based on the list that you have, you would check mark the wrestlers that you'll be bringing into this event. So at 106, I'm going to grab somebody with records here. Not that these are necessarily. So I'm just going to pick 3 weight classes. Again, you would go through that whole list, but for time's sake, I'll go through and pick 3. Let's say that Cameron was actually a 13-pounder. I could switch that here. I could do that. I'm actually going to leave him at 20, but I could update this information. I would select whether I want to bring the media contacts that that team has listed. I would say there's no harm in selecting yes there. Because we're testing, I'm going to be removing all of these wrestlers once we're done here tonight. I'm just going to pick no. I'm going to check all the wrestlers I want to bring in, verify that they're in the correct weights, and then click next. And then there's one more finish button. So it's going to say that these wrestlers are added, and it'll bring me to this team's page. Again, I'm only doing 3, but you would go through that whole process for each of those teams. I like the operating menu, but you can go to any of these menus, click teams, and then I would move on down to the next team, click here to import, select the wrestlers that I would want. Let's say that this is actually our 13-pounder. I can switch that. And this is our 20. So I'm going to get those 3 weight classes again, answer the media contacts question, select next, and then finish. So if I come back to my teams page, so I would go through that process for each of the teams. So that's the process of taking the wrestlers and entering them into the actual tournament. So if I went here and looked at the weight classes page, and I looked at 106, you'll see that now I have about half the wrestlers that I've imported in. And that would be the case. We have about half of them in at each of the first 3 weights. Any questions there that we need to address? Greg, anything else you think we need to hit on?
I don't have any questions. Is there anyone on the webinar that's got any questions on importing wrestler names from each school? Okay.
Okay. Yep. Yep. And I'll point out, maybe a few times along the way, if you guys do have questions, our ticket system, call us. Our support staff is around to help you guys out with that. So
the only thing I would note, Shane, the only thing I would note is after you've imported wrestlers into the tournament, because our coaches themselves build their rosters in the OPC, some of them put their wrestlers' names in all caps, and some of them put them in all lowercase, and some of them put the wrestlers' names with the first initial capitalized and the first name and the first letter capitalized and the last name. Once you get those names imported, show them the best place to go to view imported wrestlers for them to make sure that all of the names are listed correctly based on the information I've given them.
You bet. So I think probably the easiest way to do that would be on the wrestlers page. And again, I use this operating menu. You'll notice that the wrestlers page is in a lot of these menus. But you just want to go to this wrestlers page. And actually, we're going to be coming here to do the next step in matching wrestlers anyway. So I would click here. You can sort. This is going to show you all of the wrestlers that you've imported. You can sort any of these columns alphabetically by clicking on name. So you notice I'm alphabetical, ascending here. If I click it again, it's going to bring me to the end of the alphabet. So this is probably a good place to come through and scan. And if you saw one, let's say that these were all caps, or there's something that you needed to adjust there, there's some, something, that didn't look right, you can just click on the wrestler's name, and then you could edit this from here. So I could change that. I won't change it because that seems to be the correct spelling. But this is where I would change it. I hit Save Participant. And then in this case, then, you could either go back to the team members of the weight class, so you can go back to all those wrestlers on that team, or just go back to the wrestlers page. But that's how you could easily change any of these.
I think if you take a look at the team name, some of them's got HS on them. That's not necessary, in my opinion. I don't know if Track can do anything to. I don't know if you guys have a feature that lets you remove that in mass quantity at one time, but that would be something that we could do to maybe save our managers a little bit down the road.
I can have our guys take care of that tomorrow if you'd like.
Okay.
I'm just going to make a note, so I'm sorry. I know we're recording, but I want to make sure I don't forget. Remind me tomorrow too if you're not seeing it updated tomorrow, Greg. We'll definitely take care of that.
Okay.
So we'll remove that. Okay. So anyway, any of those edits you need to make would come from there. We'll go ahead and try and update those team names. But then a really critical piece to this. So again, we're trying to make this connection between the wrestlers that are in the tournament to the wrestlers that are on the track wrestling, the OPC side. And again, because we're drawing that data from that side, it's all those results that the coaches have been entering all year. We're drawing from past accomplishments in a couple of situations. So we're going to want to make sure we've got those wrestlers matched correctly. And the way that I do that, and this is probably in your instructions as well, but from this wrestlers page, in this drop down at the top, I want to come to this spot called Match to Dual System. I click Go, and then I'm going to have to type Match here. If you read through that, it basically just says type Match. We're going to try and match those up. And then I hit OK. This opens this page. You're going to see an awful lot of red here just because I haven't brought a lot of those wrestlers in. But the wrestlers that we have actually imported are going to show down here. This is a good page to scan. I want to make sure I'm actually matching to the correct wrestler. What you will see in here on occasion, probably not as often, in your case, the way that you bring these in, but there might be a case where maybe Josh is referred to as JT or, Junior, or whatever the case might be. Again, not critical that it's the exact same name, just critical it's the same person. So something to pay attention to. And I will point out, too, that the way that this matching function works is when this page opens, our system goes back and matches those wrestlers. So in the case, you come here, you open this page, you get them all matched, a change gets made for whatever reason, maybe there's a replacement, and for whatever reason that might be, you're going to want to come back to this page, just open it up to match those wrestlers. Maybe the takeaway is that right before you start your actual seating, you're going to want to come here, open this page to make sure that we have that link back to the right wrestlers. You don't need to sign off yet, but as long as you're here just before you start the seating, doesn't hurt to do that as well. I'll leave this for the actual site host to do, though.
Shane,
so
that's a great point. Shane, that's a great point that you're making on the screen right now, because last year, the day following the district seating meetings, I received a number of phone calls saying that at a certain weight class, we pulled up the automated seating program and there was matches missing. More than likely, folks, you guys know that those of you that's run a district tournament, you know that right before you reveal the name of the entries at 106, you may have a coach pop up and say, I've got a change at 106. Jimmy's no longer my 6-pounder. I'm entering Sam. Well, if you go in there to the team list and change that from Jimmy to Sam, you have to make sure to come back to this match to dual system, or when you go to the auto seed program, there will be matches missing. Correct, Shane?
That is correct. Yep. So basically, again, the key point here is right before you go to seed, you'd want to open that matching page. And again, it's right from this wrestlers page in this drop down, match to dual. All I need to do is type match. The function of opening this page is what actually draws that data. So that's an important piece. So it's as fast as that. I would probably go to double check it. That piece isn't probably as important as just getting this page open. So once I do that, and again, signing off at that point is probably just fine to do. Greg's point is a good one. If you have a change mid-meeting, you'd want to go back and match those wrestlers again just to make sure. Again, it only takes a second, not hard to do, but it's a really, really important piece, so I probably can't stress that one enough. So once the wrestlers are matched, now we're ready to go ahead and start seeding. And the way I do that is just like last year. I'm going to come into the bracketing menu, and I'm going to go to seed build brackets. I'm going to open this page. This pop-up talks about deleting any invalid entries. Some of you probably have a habit, and this is just fine. We don't put this in our steps, but a lot of you will actually, from this wrestlers page, run this function that is called delete unknowns. That's just fine to do. What that's going to do is it's going to get rid of all of these wrestlers. And what these really are those teams that are not entering a wrestler at a particular weight. So you could run that first. But from this seed build page, each time you go to build a bracket, the system's going to delete those unknowns at that point anyway. So, but what it does if you don't do that is you sometimes see this cluttered a little bit. So, but if I start at 106, there's a few things that you see this time of year in Missouri that you don't during the regular season if you're running track wrestling tournaments. And primarily it's these two buttons right here. And this is the link to that seeding algorithm that we've built and that you guys have used. The fetch criteria and the view criteria. So those are those links back there. What you'd want to do, by default, the system is going to look at and try to seed or view the report for any wrestlers that are over 500. So if there is a reason for you to want to try and seed or look at consideration for a seed with wrestlers that are under 500, then you'd want to check mark these wrestlers. So is that right, Greg? I think you want them checking, or do you just want the system to look at the 500s?
Actually, a wrestler could potentially, it's different from district to district, but a wrestler could potentially be seeded even if they don't have a 500 record. I'm kind of reviewing my steps here on the seeding protocol in that document that I just sent, and that's where we're about to start anyway, is using our seeding protocol. The first thing our coaches have to do is they have to take a look at the page that you're on right now and take a look at the wrestlers entered at the weight class, and then they're going to have to collectively vote as a group on the number of wrestlers to seed at this weight class. Okay.
Let me delete the unknowns. That's going to make it easier for us here. So again, this step probably isn't in. I think for our purposes tonight, it's a helpful one. So I'm going to go. I'm going to go to wrestlers, and I'm just going to get rid of any wrestlers that aren't in here.
Okay.
That aren't entered, that we didn't import. I can type. Okay, so now when we go back to this page, we're only going to see the actual wrestlers. So the unknowns are gone.
Okay. So my instructions.
So if I went. Yep. Oh, go ahead.
My instructions that I've given them in the document that I just sent to you said that that we'll first select the fetch MSHSAA criteria and then select all the wrestlers by placing a check mark next to each wrestler, and then select the number of seeds from the drop-down menu.
Yeah, so probably the best way to do this. Yep, so if we check mark next to each, so we could do this two ways. You can place a check manually next to each of them,
Which honestly,
Or,
that seating criteria box that you're on right there, you guys coded that, I believe, specifically because we were wanting
pretty
to
sure you
select
did.
all of them at once.
You didn't like clicking them all at once. I don't blame you. So that box will check or uncheck all of them. So you go ahead, we can check them all, and what that's really saying is we want to compare all these wrestlers, regardless of their record, their criteria. And then the first thing I would do is come and click View the Seed Report. And this will open up, and I'll just blow this up so we can see it a little easier. So this is going to be all of the wrestlers, regardless of any of those criteria. It's going to compare, it looks like 9 wrestlers. So it's going to compare Calvin to the other wrestlers. It's going to compare Cody to all of the other wrestlers, and so on. And in the end, what we're looking at is this number of seed points. And what this tells us, if there's 8 points here, it means that after comparing in various ways that we'll talk about in a second, Calvin won the head-to-head, comparison between 8 of these. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, so we have 9 wrestlers. Calvin is going to be the 1 seed because he won. He has 8 points. Cody would be the 2 seed because he got 6, and so on. So this would be if we seeded everybody straight on down the line. So wanting to know how we came to those points, we can do a couple of things. So if you look at comparison graph, actually better yet, let me start here. If I click on Calvin, it's going to tell me exactly why Calvin was number 1. It's going to look at head-to-head. It's going to look at common opponent. It's also going to look at high school state place and district place from last year, which would be 14-15. And so this will detail all those things out. If we look at the head-to-head between Tanner and Calvin, no head-to-head, or we would see it in here. But the common opponents, there were 2 common opponents. Calvin actually was 2-0 versus the common opponents. If I click on anything blue and highlighted, just like you would anywhere on the web, if I click here, it's going to open these up. It's going to show that the common opponent was Evan. He won by a technical fall and 5 points, I guess, for that tech fall.
Hey, Greg Stahl.
Yep.
This is Joe Grime.
Yep.
Just a reminder, we sat through this meeting. When we were going through the process to figure out how to determine number of seeds, we weren't going this route. We did it off just the weight class roster because we didn't want the bitching and complaining about all these points and people getting up in arms about it. So we showed them without any criteria. So it was just a weight class roster, like a 106-pound roster where it just shows the list of kids. And then we said maybe we're seeding 5 out of it. And then we came to the seat. We were determining number of seats off of this sheet right here that we're seeing now. And then we got
this page here?
Yeah, that's how we determined how many we were seating.
Okay.
And then we went to build the bracket page and then started through what we're going through now. That's a reminder for you.
Right.
Okay.
You could actually use this page, or you could,
we did that so we didn't see the criteria, because if you don't apply criteria to all, or if you apply it to all and then you're only selecting the ones you're going to seed, then it threw it off.
Right.
That's why we did number of seeds off of this sheet right here.
Right.
And then we get into it. So, and it's in that's how your directions read too.
Yeah. And thanks for that reminder. We got a little bit ahead of ourselves there.
That's my fault. I'm not looking at your sheet.
Yeah, that's okay. That's all right. You would want to look at this sheet to do that coach's vote for determining your number of seeds before you even get to the page. Now go to the page, Shane, that you've got where you check mark everybody.
You bet. So when you hit this, so again, going back just to make sure and we get the right order, when I go to seed build, I go to 106. If you click on this wrestlers link, this is going to bring us to this page that you guys are referring to. This right now is sorted alphabetically. Maybe that's the way you want to do it. You could also sort by record if you wanted, by clicking that column. Not sure how you guys, want to take a look at that, but just so you know, these columns are sortable by clicking on the header.
Mm-hmm.
So that might come in handy. So let's say in this, and maybe, is it safe to assume that we would seed 4 in this weight?
Yeah, go ahead and do that. And then when we get back to the page, folks, that shows the points that each wrestler gets, please note in step 2 of your seeding protocol that that's just a preliminary ranking report. That is not finalized seeding. The way that we use this. That just gives you
So the way to get back to...
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, I was just going to say the way to get back into that is click the seeds page, and this is going to bring us back to this familiar page. And in our case, it's actually by default going to sort by that winning percentage. So let's say that we knew that now we had these 4 wrestlers that we wanted to seed, and again, that could be 3, it could be 5, whatever you'd want to take a look at. And then now if we click this View Seed Report, it's going to bring back just those wrestlers that we've selected. And now the comparison is Kelvin to just these 3 wrestlers. A couple of items here. Again, we kind of talked about this. If I click on a wrestler, it's going to, again, this wrestler was 3rd in state, 1st in districts last year. It shows the common opponent in the head-to-head. What we can also do, we can look at this wrestler comparison graph. Let me move this a little. This is going to show the actual matches between, where was Kelvin? So this is Kelvin versus Oscar, Cody, and Jordan. Again, the 4 involved. Kelvin beat Oscar, he beat Cody, he beat Jordan. Obviously, that's going to put him ahead in that comparison. So this kind of tells the arrow points towards the loser, I guess, if you want to think of it that way. It's confusing for some, but again, once you get the hang of what that is. But so that's going to be how that report. And then on this, the opponent graph, maybe more information than you need, but this is going to show all the matches that are in our system for these wrestlers. So again, all kinds of data there for you to use if you wish.
So if you condense that, Shane, just to show the page with the points. Okay. So basically, for us, we would select every wrestler in the weight class on the screen previous to this, like you did the first time, all 9 wrestlers, and then this screen is what we call the preliminary ranking report. And then after that, after we've shown the preliminary ranking report, we're going to go back and we're going to determine seed by seed who's over who.
So from here then?
Yeah, so let's say in this case we go back and the district manager says, okay, who's up for the 1 seed, while still, and I've gotten our instructions that if at all possible, the district managers should try to leave that preliminary ranking report visible so they can see in points how the wrestlers are listed. They're going to leave that visible in some manner, write it on a chalkboard, write it on an overhead, whatever you got to do to show what the preliminary ranking report stated. And then we're going to go back and we're going to determine seed by seed. So the district manager is going to ask, based on the preliminary ranking report, who believes that they're in for the 1 seed. And in this case, let's say Park Hill and Blue Springs South both say, I believe they're in there. I want to take a look at that directly at those 2 wrestlers.
So maybe, though, just to make sure, and again, I apologize, not knowing exactly these exact steps, but once I go to fetch these criteria, it's actually going to lay them out with their points. Mm-hmm. So did you want, let's do one that way, because maybe that's what you're doing. That's probably why we had this button. But if I look at all of these and I go to fetch those, it's going to order them in that preliminary order, and then you can move them from there. So if I were to fetch this one and I check marked all of them, going to put these wrestlers, it's going to show their points that we had in this same seed report with all of them, of course. Well, I guess I had 4 of them checked.
Yeah.
I checked all of them. It's going to show those same points, 8, 6, 4.5, 8, 6, 4.5. So this is probably how you would want to get your preliminary seeds. And then in the case where then again, this seed report, if we wanted to see more detailed information about Kelvin, it would have all those in there. Again, I think I heard at one point this was too many wrestlers, and maybe we're now narrowing it down to, why is this guy the 1 seed over him? Now we can see just the comparison of the two. If there were a case where you would decide, the coaches voted, whatever that case might be, Cody was supposed to actually be the 1 seed, I can actually just use the arrow to move Cody there. Okay, it overrides any of this data that we've pulled from the system.
Let me just add, Shane, the reason why we check mark all the names in the weight class and view that seed report that we're calling the preliminary ranking report, or what I'm referring to as the preliminary ranking report, that allows the coaches to see, based on what's in track wrestling, this is how they would be seated. However, once we establish that preliminary ranking of 1 through 9 in this case, we're going to come back to this screen and we're going to uncheck them like you did a while ago. And what we're going to do is then basically the district managers have to say who wants in for the 1 seed based on the preliminary rankings, and obviously Park Hill and Blue Springs South, let's say that they both say they want to take a look at just the 2 of them for the 1 seed. So if you check mark those 2 names now and then view MSHSAA seed report, this allows you to eliminate all wrestlers except for those 2 to go look at what common opponents and head-to-head results are in there just for those 2 wrestlers. I mean, there may be situations where you have coaches pop up that results in 3 kids being up for the 1 seed or 3 kids being up for the 2 seed. This step just allows you to narrow it down to the commons and head-to-heads of just those wrestlers being considered for the seed.
Sure.
Joe Grime, you were in our advisory committee meeting, going through this. Do you have anything to add there in regards to those 2 separate steps?
No, that is exactly what we talked about. We finally got, that is correct.
Let's do another weight class as long as we kind of got this nailed down. Does that sound good to everybody? We'll walk through another weight class and
sure.
And with that process, does that sound good?
Yep.
So I guess in this case, if there were no changes to be made here, then we would determine how deep we wanted to seed, whether we wanted to seed all 9, or if we were only going to seed 3, 4, 5, whatever the case might be. Maybe it's a good time to ask that question now, or Greg, maybe you can clarify.
Well, right now, I think we said theoretically for this class we would have voted to seed 4 wrestlers, correct? Mm-hmm. So in that drop-down menu is where you would have already selected that, right? Seed through 4s?
Not until just before we build. So, I mean, you could do that at any point. But by default, it's going to seed everyone. So what we'd want to do is if we've decided this is a weight class where we're seeding 4, we would change the drop-down to seed through 4. And this is on a per weight class basis.
Yeah.
And then I would go ahead and build the bracket. And if I viewed that bracket, by clicking that link, you'd see your bracket.
So
let's go to 113.
Can you go back to that bracket?
You bet.
District managers, just so you know, we're far away from the day of drawing ping pong balls. So, with that said, track wrestling is coded to randomly draw in those unseeded wrestlers in that weight class. And that's what we currently have in our manual permitting, is the random draw of unseeded wrestlers. Just wanted to make sure any first-time users knew how those other names got in there, Shane.
Yep. And so the system will also, well, it separates teams, but in that case, in this case, obviously that doesn't factor in because there's only one, but it's going to even out buys as well. So you notice there's 1, 2, 3, 4 on one side, 1, 2, 3 on the other. So happens that the 4 seed got the match, but again, that was random as well. So that is correct. So if we were to move on to 113, I'll just select the new weight from the drop down. I think the first step then, if I'm hearing you guys correctly, is we want to assign all those seed points pre-seed,
Correct.
Pre-seed the weight class by using this checkbox. That, of course, is going to check mark all wrestlers.
Seeds.
Oh, you're right. So we want to look at wrestlers, right?
Yeah.
And if we wanted to sort by record, we could do that. This probably isn't a great example because we've got quite a few, lower records in there. Then we would come to seeds, check mark all of them, and we would fetch. Is that right? Am I hearing you guys right?
Yeah, back up a minute to the weight class roster page. Just to review, again, district managers, if you have that document in front of you right now, we are back to step 1 under seating protocol. This is the weight class roster page that you're looking at right now. Here is where you're going to ask the coaches to look at the entered wrestlers at this weight class and vote on the number of wrestlers to seed at this weight class before you move on. And then from this point, you've secured. Let's say that we've secured the vote, and they've said let's just seed 4 here. Okay. So now we're going to click the seeds link and go, Shane.
Okay.
And then seeding criteria, check mark that box. So that check marks every name on the screen. Fetch MSHSAA criteria.
Yep. Which puts them in that pre-seed order.
And where's the points page?
So you'll see it here. So you'll see the points and the seed here. It's going to sort them in order of these points. And then if I wanted to see a comparison, maybe this time it's the 2 and the 3 you're looking to compare, right?
Yep.
I could check mark those 2 and then view this report to see that comparison between those 2. This happens to be a tie.
Yep. So let's take a look at that so we can see where the tie is going to be broken.
In this case, I think we've moved through all of our criteria, and neither of them have a place last year. There's no head-to-head and no common opponents.
So this would be a scenario, managers, again, we're taking we kind of went through this. Shane, do me a favor and exit out of that. Go back, and we're back at actually step 2, where we're going to place a check mark to every wrestler's name. And I think we have to select the number of seeds from the drop-down menu, right, to 4.
This is only going to be when we actually build the bracket. So that part, I think what you're referring to is if we want to see the top 4 comparison, I would check mark these 4.
Actually, check
this
mark.
This drop down is.
Select every kid.
Okay.
So we've selected all wrestlers and then view MSHSAA seed report. There's our preliminary rankings page of all wrestlers in the weight class. Write this up on a chalkboard, overhead projector, whatever you got to do so coaches always have a visual reference back to this order, okay? You can exit out of that once you've got that written up. Go ahead and exit out of that, Shane. So now what we're going to do is uncheck all the names, and who's in for the 1 seed? Nobody but Blue Springs pops up. So they're the 1 seed. Once you move on to determining the 2 seed, you can't go back to the 1. It's set, it's done per MSHSAA Wrestling Manual. So who's up for the 2 seed? Lamar Stewart and Philip Carson, they're up for the 2 seed. View MSHSAA seed report. Go ahead and select that.
So this is one where it's literally that tie. So everything that we're looking. Mm-hmm.
So basically, we're just comparing these two. We see that they're tied in points. Again, we can view just the comparison of these 2 wrestlers. Okay? So essentially, you have just compared all of their head-to-heads and common opponents that are in track wrestling. Okay? You can click on, apparently they don't have one because there's zeros, right?
They do not. Yep, they do not have any common opponents or head-to-head.
So both of them, they don't have any commons. They don't have head-to-head with each other. So automatically, they have nothing. So that's where that half point comes in. And that was confusing a year or 2 ago. That half point was confusing to folks. So basically, at this point, using this example, we've gone through criteria number 1. Now we go to criteria number 2, returning state champion or returning state medalist, either one. Neither one are. As you can see, it says did not place, none of the above. So now we go to criteria 3, returning district champ or runner-up, none. Now we're at seeding criteria 4. So now you're at a coach's vote right now to see who the 2 seed is. That's what breaks the tie. And let's say the coach's vote reveals Lamar Stewart is the 2 seed. Now we're going to go to the 3. Who's in for the 3 seed? Nobody but Philip Carson. So now we go to the 4 seed. Who's in for the 4? Well, maybe Hunter Mason and Julius Vaughns say I'm in for the 4 seed. So you check mark those 2 names. You view your seed report. That'll bring up now you're back to step 1 under common opponent and head-to-head criteria. You're comparing just those wrestlers who's in for that seed. Again, there's a tie, no commons, no head-to-head. Each wrestler gets a half a point. Now we're down to seeding criteria number 2, returning state champion. Okay?
Yep, and then there was none of it there.
So just so I'm clear, when you're looking at this report, if they were a district placer or a state placer last year, they would have a point added in, and they would already be ahead of they would already have the criteria figured in, correct?
No.
In this case, that probably would be true. They would have had, it wouldn't have been a 0.5. So here's an example probably here, because I think, it was the weight class before. I don't think we had any returning placers here, did we? No. If one of them did have a place either at state or at district, after the head-to-head and common opponent, it would look at that. Let's say this wrestler did. He would have gotten 1 point. This wrestler would have gotten 0.
Right.
So the example is a good one, but we're still down to that coach's vote, I suppose.
That's why when you check mark all of those names and you click View MSHSAA Seed Report, that's why we're calling that a preliminary rankings page. Okay? Because if you pull that up, Allie Hauk, of her 5 total points, maybe one of those 5 points is for being a state medalist. So that's why we get that preliminary rankings page, and then we go back and we just determine seed by seed who to compare against.
Hey, Greg.
Yeah.
This is Seneca. I got a question, I guess probably more for track, but on the seeding criteria, whenever you get to step 3, it talks about a district champion or runner-up, and it also talks within adjacent weight classes. Does track take into account for that?
Go ahead, Shane.
I don't think we're looking at that. If I look at, so I'm going to go back to 106. We did have this wrestler, I think one of these. I'm just going to look at this report because I thought this guy was a returning state. Yeah. It does not show at weight. I could check into that, but typically when we do this, it does not show at weight. It's showing any. So if there were 2 wrestlers that were returning and maybe they were both, maybe let's say we had 2 kids that were third, both were first, it's not going to break that down by weight. And that's one where you guys would have to take a look at that and move them manually.
And I was going to get to that. I was getting to that point next, Shane.
Okay.
Basically, we've always, when it comes to the district champion or district runner-up from last year, we've always had to just manually in our seating meeting have the coach confirm what weight class that was at the previous year, because track has never been able to provide the coding that would recognize a same or adjacent weight class.
We can look at same. We're going to look at the weight that they were at, but we can't look at adjacent. Yeah, that's true.
See, that's going to be a problem, though, because whenever you get into that, if both kids finished second at state last year and then one was a district champion and one was a runner-up, it's automatically going to give him a point. If there's no commons, it's going to automatically give him a point that's not actually a point that should be given because it's not an adjacent weight class.
It wouldn't. I don't think in this case it's going to give a point for that district place finish spot because it can't look at adjacent weight class.
So whenever they put it in there, though, as they took first or second, say if you've got one that was a champion and one was a runner-up, and everything else is even, it's going to automatically give him a point because he was a champion compared to a runner-up.
That is correct. Let's say that neither of them were a state place winner, but we had a first and a second we were comparing.
Yep.
The first would get the point over second.
And as a reminder, again, when you select all the wrestlers' names and view that MSHSAA seed report, that is a preliminary rankings list only. That is not seed order. So those points that they're earning in that list is a preliminary ranking only. So once you get that preliminary ranking screen that you're going to get if you clicked View MSHSAA Seed Report right now because he's got all the names selected, again, you simply write that order down with the number of points earned for each wrestler and then go back one seed at a time and compare the wrestlers who the coaches believe that they are in for the 1 seed or the 2 seed or the 3 seed. So if you go back and start with the 1 seed and you just compare 2 wrestlers at a time, that's where you're going to be able to look at the direct common opponents and head-to-heads of those 2 wrestlers and see why exactly, in this case, Kelvin's got a 1 and Cody's got 0.
And in this case, if I click on Kelvin, he was third in state, so that's why he's getting the seed. None of this other stuff technically would have mattered because they didn't have that. Well, I guess the common opponent would have.
let's say theoretically speaking, right now the screen we're looking at, it said Kelvin with 1 point and Cody with 1 point. When you click on the blue highlighted number down below, take a look at on why it's doing it. Okay, right there in the criteria box, let's say Kelvin's, let's just say for now that he was third at state and Cody was third at state, and the district place last year was first for Kelvin, and it was second place for Cody. You're going to manually catch that it's given him a point for that first place district finish over Cody's second place district finish, but in reality, when it comes to seeding criteria, it's a push because we recognize as criteria number 3 district champion or runner-up. And as Shane stated a while ago, when you recognize that, that's when you would go to that seeding criteria 4 to break that tie of a coach's vote.
Hey, Shane, this is Dorda. I had a quick question, if that's okay.
Sure.
When you're pulling all these seeds over, and I see that when you go back to your seed page, you've got the MSHSAA seed, the seed points, everything that you've got in that other preliminary report shows up here, except for state place. Like Kelvin, it's got him placing last year, but if you look down in his column, it says did not place last season.
Yeah, and this stuff really doesn't ever get looked at. We could probably pull this out. I think this was probably still in here before we started using, the data directly from the season. These are showing still when we used to do it where coaches would go in and enter that. Was he a state place winner last year for second, third, fourth? So
okay, it'll pull the other stuff off the report. It just won't pull that part at the bottom.
It pulls it here if we look at this again. So if we look at the seed report, it is pulling that he was third. It's not the same, and maybe it's time just to pull all of this other criteria off of here, because all we're really looking at is, what we're looking at first is the seed points that get pulled on that comparison, right? He's got 8 because he won 8 head-to-head, like comparisons with the other wrestlers.
Right.
And then this gets sorted first, and it puts them in order. So really, none of this other stuff is probably ever going to get looked at.
Okay.
Hey, Shane.
And I guess until we get to those ties, but yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, Shane.
Hmm?
Where does that state place and stuff get entered at? Is that coming off of you guys? I mean, that's not where the coaches are putting it in, is it?
No.
Nope. They don't need to pull it in. So let me. So this is Park Hill. So let me show you guys, and this is. So on each of the team's roster pages, when they go to their rosters, I apologize, I'm just going to try and whip through here real quick and show you where they can see it. They don't enter it. We do a draw, and it pulls directly from those events last year. And so the reason that that's even more effective is that, now coaches don't have to enter it. They don't forget. They don't, and not that they would intentionally, enter it incorrectly or dishonestly, but this is directly from, was that Park Hill? Was that where that guy was from?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I go to their roster and I go to Kelvin, and each of the coaches can go and look at this, and I go to seed criteria, this is where it's showing. I can click these drop downs. Coaches can't. I'm logged in as me, however that sounds, but I could go in and change those just with the rights that we have here at Track. Coaches can't change that. This is where it's getting drawn from. We actually pull that criteria through. We've already done that. So any of those past placements are already in here. So the answer to the question is they're not entering it. It's a track wrestling event from last year, so we pulled it, and we know it's there. So again, the coaches don't have to enter. As a matter of fact, they never even have access to enter anything into your tournaments. That function is never opened up for them. You're importing them. They're not entering any of that head-to-head or criteria like you might on a normal, regular season tournament.
in layman's terms, it's an automatic poll because we've used track wrestling for our postseason tournaments the last, I think this is our 5th year, but it's set up to recognize just last year's placement at the state and district tournaments.
It's also the same reason we can get this actual data. These are all the matches that are in the system for these wrestlers. So we can see every one of those wrestlers. It's these two because we're comparing those two. So you can see all of that stuff. Again, for most, that's more information than they're going to want to see, but it's there. So the pieces are, we're looking at last year's state and district. We're also looking at all of the match results that are entered this year. So we got sidetracked just a little bit, but the building process, once you get your seeds, again, if we want to move, let's say you do this comparison with these two, you decide that Phillip is actually supposed to be the 2 seed. Moving a wrestler is simple to do. You can either click and put the actual seed you want to move them to. Typically, this little arrow works great just because you're usually moving them once, but it just flip-flops those two. Recall, again, I think maybe we were seeding 4 in this way. It was a while ago when we decided that.
Yep, that's right.
Going to seed through 4. It's going to take this top 4 and then draw the rest along with the buys. I build the bracket. And then I can view the bracket by clicking on the red link for bracket. And you'll see that our top 4 seeds went in there. The buys and the matches got drawn in again. And that so happens that it landed there. I promise you, it's random.
So, Shane, we're going to seed and build brackets on Thursday night, but lo and behold, weigh-ins is going to come on Friday. And we've got, I don't know, let's say we got Lamar Stewart's our 3 seed, and he's sick and he's a scratch. So just step through them real quick on how to remove Lamar and rebuild their bracket.
Okay. Here's what I'm going to do too, and this is probably a good thing for us to send out. I'm on another screen right now, but I'm going to open and show you like the steps of an FAQ that we can pass along, Greg. I'm not sure if they have these or not yet, but I'm not sure if I sent this to you or not. But can you guys see this? Can you see that over the top now?
Yep. Okay.
So I'll send this, and basically this is how do I replace a wrestler on a bracket that was built. Actually, that's not. You don't build on a matrix. That's not the one you'd want anyway. Okay. So on the bracket, maybe Greg, tell me what your process would be. You have, I think you said this Lamar is not going to be in here anymore. Right. Would you move your seeds up, or would you just rebuild? Okay.
4 would go to 3. You would have a new 4, and you would randomly draw it over.
Okay. So what I would do then is I would come here. I could click on Lamar. I would delete him as a participant by typing delete. And then, I apologize, my Windows got a little bit funky there. So I'm going to be asked these questions. Change the bracket type if needed. We would not want to change the bracket type. Replace the wrestler with the buy. That's not necessarily what we're going to do. So we wouldn't want to do that. We're going to redraw. Actually, you're going to move the wrestlers up. So we would want to redraw nobody and shift nobody for this situation. And I would go finish. And what you'll see is we've kind of skipped this 3 seed. We'd come here and we'd want to change Hunter now, who was the 4, to the 3. Are we going through and determining that 4 seed now, or are we just seeding the top 3?
They would go through and you'd run a comparison to see who's the new 4 seed. Let's say it's, let's go ahead and say it's Branson.
Okay. And I could compare, maybe it's a couple that we needed to compare there, right?
Right.
I could view them again, see how that comparison goes. Once I decided, let's say that maybe it's, let's move Grant, and it's a little different than the way we did it before, but we would go put him to the 4. If I go through and I'm going to seed 4 wrestlers again, this time I'm going to rebuild the bracket. Oop, I thought I had to type, but I do not. It's going to move Grant. Was it Grant that I moved up there? That's who I moved, right? That was him. If I go and view the bracket again, I'll see that Grant then did get moved to the 4 seed, and the rest, well, I guess now we had 1 less wrestler, so it's all buys in that first round just because we didn't have all our wrestlers in. And that's how you would do it. So basically, the first step is to remove the wrestler by clicking on the one you want to delete and deleting them. You want to answer those questions that say redrawing nobody, shifting nobody, because we're actually going to kind of reseed in this case. And then from there, we moved the wrestler to the seed that we wanted him to be at. And then we just rebuilt it again using those same 4 seeds, which, of course, we replaced the 4 with a different one this time.
Shane, that will randomly redraw the unseeded wrestlers.
It will, that's correct. So
Yep.
This function right here is the critical piece to that. If I were to say seed all wrestlers, it would take them in this seed order and place them all in the bracket. But because we're saying seed through 4, we're only going to look at these top 4. Everybody else, along with the buys, are going to be randomly drawn in. Those buys do get separated evenly on each side of the bracket, and then from there, then the wrestlers are placed.
Just so I'm clear.
Sure.
I have a quick question. So on the day of the tournament, right before weigh-ins, they have a scratch, and then we're going to reseed or we're just shifting up. Because you picked the number 4 seed with. That means we have to get all the coaches together to make sure that person's the 4 seed, or we're just dropping it to 3 seeds and redrawing.
You're going to have a coaches meeting anyway prior to wrestling starting on that first day of the tournament. And the biggest reason for having that coaches meeting is to see if there's any scratches from who they entered during the seeding meeting on Thursday night. If it is a seeded wrestler, for example, a first seed, second seed, third seed, if any of those are scratches, all seeded wrestlers will be moved up 1 spot, leaving you, in this case, with responsibility of determining a new 4 seed.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Perfect. That's it.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
And I ended up just picking somebody who was close there, probably just for ease sake. But we could have done that with any of these wrestlers that we compared. Again, it's just a matter of using this drop down to place them at the 4 if that were where we were going to put them.
Greg, I have a question.
Go right ahead.
So if a wrestler scratches, is the team allowed to make a replacement on Friday prior to weigh-ins?
Caught me off guard on that one. Honestly, I don't have my manual open, and off the top of my head, I believe the manual states that it's right in the district manager's manual. I'm sorry, I don't have that open. And I would, Shane, if you've got anything else while I'm taking a look at that, feel free to.
Sure. I think what I'll do then is I would probably move on while you're looking at that. Obviously, that process for building and seating is going to be the same for each weight class. What you're going to want to do, and these are probably just they're steps in the process. They're not necessarily related to seating. But once you have everything built, you're ready to go, you're going to want to come into, and I'll point you to this to-do list too. Most of you hopefully are working through this. But we're kind of going to get to the point where you're building brackets, verifying you're built, and then you want to apply this number scheme. And what that's going to do for you is it's going to give each bout in your tournament a unique number rather than starting each weight class with one. And all you need to do, I'm going to cancel that out so I have a little more space. But in this operating menu, I just click, I go to number schemes, and again, it's in your to-do list. But we've added this all scheme, and I think that works for all of you. It should anyway, unless you have something really specific that you need to do and you really know what you're doing. And then all I would do is apply selected schemes. Because I've not numbered anything, I could leave the frozen status as is. If I've already built brackets, I might unfreeze the existing bout numbers and renumber everything, but just know unfreezing is going to renumber everything, so you'd need to reprint and all that good stuff. But then all I need to do is click Continue, Apply, and then now if we look at one of these brackets, let's look at 113 for instance, you'll notice that these numbers, this doesn't start with 1, it starts with 6 because the first 5 matches are actually at 106. So basically just applying that number scheme. Again, a lot of you run track wrestling events. That's real kind of, track wrestling 101 type stuff, but certainly it's a step that gets missed kind of in the hustle and bustle of wanting to get your event up and running.
Yeah, do me a favor. Let's go through that again a little slower.
You got it.
We always have something going on someplace. So we've gone through the seating. We've gone through the seating meeting. We've printed brackets. We've got numbers. Now we have, say, there's a couple of weight classes where there's kids sick or somebody misses weight. Let's go
Changes,
through that.
right? Yep, you got it.
Yep.
So same steps, and maybe I'll slow down and explain the concept behind each of those things. So again, we're at that point. You already built brackets. You numbered, and now you had some changes. And what happens when you make changes, of course, if you had 4 matches in the first round and you pull a wrestler out, now you have 3. If you've added 1 or moved them, you have 5. So it throws off those numbers throughout your event.
Yep.
When I apply the number schemes, and in your case it's going to be just this one, I have really 3 selections to choose from. The leave frozen status, let's not even concern ourselves too much with that one right now. Let's talk about picking either freeze or unfreeze. If I were to freeze the existing bouts, let's take one weight class as an example. If I had those 5 bouts in the first round and I numbered the brackets, the first 5 bouts at 106 would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I numbered them, that's what they are. I pull a wrestler out of that weight. Now a bye gets thrown in. We're not numbering the byes. So now in that weight class, I only have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if I wanted to just renumber everything from start to finish, I'm wiping it clean.
And of course, it's throwing your numbers off throughout the rest of the tournament. Okay.
Exactly. You're going to have skips. If you're adding matches, you might have duplicates. Yeah. In a lot of cases, it's not a huge deal as long as you know why it happened. I would say that not even the general rule of thumb, but if you haven't started wrestling yet, I would say unfreeze the existing bout numbers. What that's going to do is it's basically going to wipe out the bout numbers. We're going to renumber everything from scratch. Okay. If you haven't started, I would say that's almost always your best bet.
Okay. So anytime you got scratches, you should just unfreeze the existing bout numbers, and when you click that, it'll automatically reapply the scheme.
No, you'll go unfreeze. You click continue, and then it's going to tell you to apply again. So it's the same steps. You're just telling the system, hey, are we going to wipe everything clean, start from scratch, or are we going to freeze those ones that are already out there? where that freezing of existing bout numbers comes into play, it's more common in youth, open type, JV tournaments.
Yeah.
You're half a round in, mom comes up, says, hey, Johnny's not on a bracket, you have to add him. Now you wouldn't want to renumber everything because you've got a bunch of matches out on the mat. So
All right, got it.
I would say for you guys, it would probably be rare, very rare, that you would have to do anything other than unfreeze the existing.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Does that help?
Yep.
Good deal.
I have an answer to the question earlier about if there are scratches or if there's wrestlers that do not make weight at weigh-ins. Page 7 of your district manager's manual under scratch meeting addresses how to handle just a simple scratch completely. It also gives directive on if School A has a scratch at 106, can they make a substitution? Yes, they can, but there's provisions on who can substitute. It's got to be a wrestler that's not entered in any weight class from School A. It's got to be a wrestler from School A that hasn't been entered at any weight class at that point. It also tells you what to do if the scratch is a seated wrestler versus an unseated wrestler. Page 7, item number 6 under scratch meeting.
So, Greg, I guess I'll kind of, turn it to you as to if there's anything else we need to cover. Obviously, the general tournament management type stuff wasn't really the focus here tonight, but I would encourage you all to, copy to the testing site, play with this, practice rebuilding brackets, renumbering, all those little things that, can sometimes hang people up. So you'd want to make sure you're feeling real comfortable with that. If you do have questions and you need help from us, our support line is there. You should have that. If you don't have it handy, you can always get to it from within your tournament. If you click here on Contact Us, you can submit a ticket by clicking right here. It opens up that ticket page. I know a lot of you have already been in there. Or our phone support line is here as well.
Hey, Greg, I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Maybe it's quick. We'll see. So once we throw up that preliminary seating report, what we tend to see, or what we saw last year, is that once you get down and for whatever reason we commonly seed 6 per weight class almost every time. And once you get down to that 5 or 6 seed, what you see is you have 4 or 5 guys with the same number of points on that preliminary seed report. So as we go through the seeds and we get to that point, we may have 4 or 5 guys saying that they're wanting the 5 seed. And so we put them all into the choose those 5 guys, and a lot of times, whether it's because these guys haven't seen each other all year, no common opponents, they end up with the same number of points, and it ultimately leads to a coach's vote. By the way that I read it, we're voting for all 5 of these guys for the number 5 seed. And then, based on the vote, that kid gets a seed. Then the 4 that are left all are required to be voted on again for the number 6 seed. Is that the correct interpretation of the rule first?
Well, I would take a step back and let's say that you again we'll say you're trying to determine the 5 seed, and there's 4 people that wants in on the 5 seed. So you've got those 4 wrestler names selected. You go to that view seed report. It shows that they're a tie. Okay. Once you see that it's a tie, once you see that, and you go to criteria number 2 of returning state placer, none of them are. Then you go to criteria 3, district placer. Let's say 2 of those 4 people, based on the district placer, is separated from the other 2. Okay? Take those 2 wrestlers that's been separated from the other 2 based on seating criteria number 3, and then you just do a direct comparison of those 2 wrestlers. back to criteria 1, head-to-head and common, and let's say they're still tied. Now we go.
Yeah, we already know they're tied from the criteria 1 based on the based on putting them into the.
Yes, but the point to my instruction here is once you've separated in this example that we're talking about 2 wrestlers of the 4, you've got 2 that are out. Now you're just looking at these 2 for the 5 seed. And then more than likely you're going to a coach's vote for those 2 kids. Once you determine that seed, the 5 seed, for those 2 kids, 1 is separated. Now you go to the 6, and now you may just be now you're probably dealing with the leftover 3. So the 3 that are now in for the 6 seed, now you're going to go back to criteria number 1, just to double check, just to see if there's a match missing or something of that nature that we've experienced before in the past. Again, I would say that we're getting pretty doggone close to this thing working pretty efficiently, but as long as we have the potential for human error on coaches entering matches, it's not going to be perfect without error. So that's why I think it's always important to identify the wrestlers that's up for that seed, and even though you think it still may be tied, go back to that first seeding criteria and not only see that they're tied in points based off that preliminary ranking report, go in there and check to see if the coaches are able to determine if there's a match missing somewhere along the way. I think that, Casey, wasn't that you? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I just guess what we found a lot, and I don't know if anybody else, I think I talked with Joe about this a little bit, but I found, and when you're getting to the 5 or 6 seed, not very often were those kids district place winners. You know, a lot of those kids are, you know, kids that aren't in that caliber. So what I found is that we've had a ton of votes, and then we did the same vote again, basically, multiple times in each weight class. And again, maybe it's because we're just not seeing a lot of the same kids, but it was rare if we didn't have multiple coaches' votes when seating every weight class last year, which really extended the meeting because a lot of times we're voting, like I said, based on 5 kids, so every coach is talking about their 5 kids, and then we pull 1 out, and then we're doing the same thing for all 4 kids again. Every coach is talking about the 4 kids now, and we're doing the same thing again. So I just wanted to make sure that I interpret that correctly and that we're doing that the right way.
Okay. Joe, we talked about that at the advisory committee too, and would you agree that, I mean, we landed on the coach's vote just separating out the 1 wrestler?
Yeah, that is correct. That wasn't necessarily consistent across all districts last year. Sometimes we voted to rank them in some districts to just eliminate the need for 4 votes. But we did settle on that we had to go seed by seed. So what you guys just talked about was correct, what we discussed at the advisory.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Are there any other questions on the automated seating program?
Hey, I got one real quick here, Greg.
Okay.
When you get to the district runner-up and champ, district champ has no value over district runner-up, correct?
Right now, the manual simply states that seating criteria number 3 is a returning district champion or runner-up at the same or adjacent weight class. It does not note that a champion is over a runner-up.
Okay, perfect. That's all I needed. Thanks.
Hey, Greg, I got a question for Shane. It's later on in the tournament, but on the rounds, Shane, you've got us locked out of that if you go to rounds.
Yep.
And my question is that in that quarterfinals and that first round wrestlebacks, and then also in the semifinals and the third round wrestlebacks, if we're wanting to do those on separate mats, we can't do that because they're all put to one.
So maybe the first question is,
like the quarterfinals and the consolation round, like your quarterfinals is 9, 11, 13, and 15. and then your consolation round on the back side is 10, 12, 14, and 16. So is there any way that we could split those to where we could, distinguish them on different mats?
Set your assignment scheme by match IDs.
Yeah, so you definitely can do that. And the reason that these are locked down is for those deadlines more than anything, not necessarily keep you guys from messing with your rounds. But he's exactly right. I'm not sure who chimed in, but that's the right answer. And I'll touch on this quickly, but this is definitely not, probably something that we go through too in depth tonight. But when you add a scheme, instead of picking a round, leave that round blank. So leave the round blank, do all weights, call it quarters or whatever you would. And then the match IDs, you do something like 9, 11, 13, 15, or whatever those are, and then add that. And that way, and you just would not pick a round, you would pick a match ID. Okay. And that way you can send quarters to a couple mats. You could send the backside to, a different mat if you wanted to.
Okay. Thank you.
We can definitely handle that though. So yeah, call in or shoot a ticket in if you're struggling with that. We'll help you set those up.
Nope, I can do it.
And we'll kind of end it, Shane. We'll kind of end on that note. The screen that you're on right now, actually, if you can go back to their home screen for their tournament, in this case, Class 4, District 4, in the blue menu bar, that FAQs that's a good quick tool to go to that poses several different questions there that may generate a quick answer for you, okay? If you exit out of FAQs, Shane showed you this earlier, the contact us, the ticket system. Guys, the ticket system, that's a fancy word for an email that's kept on file by topic by Track Wrestling. So don't let that confuse you. They've got a pretty solid support team that are typically pretty quick in getting back with you. The only reason I wanted to point those two troubleshooting mechanisms, tools, if you will, out while we're on the conference call today is that when you get to the seating meeting, I will be available. I'll be sending you the district manager's information on how to contact me on that night. Typically, I'm in the office and stay in the office all night that night of your seating meeting. However, on Friday, the day that your tournament starts, more than likely I'll be on the road headed somewhere. So if it comes to that Friday, I just want to make sure, in the case that you were to call the MSHSAA office or give me a call, if I wasn't able to pick up your phone call, you've got those two tools right there that you know exactly where they're at. The last thing I want to say, Shane, before we log off here, and I've sent this out in information that I've given to you probably 2 to 3 weeks ago, shortly after you got your initial email from Track Wrestling in regards to your username and password for entering your district tournament. It's very common during the regular season that a host of a tournament gives out like a password to the head coaches of the schools that's entering that tournament that allows the coaches to go into those regular season tournaments and basically post the roster of kids that's going to be wrestling in the tournament. Make absolutely sure you do not make that mistake. Don't give the username or password to your district tournament other than the person operating your program, okay? If we don't protect that access, you could have problems real quick. All right? That's really all I have for tonight.
Yep, here's that page. We don't have any of those in there, so you wouldn't want to add any at this point.
Hey, Greg, quick question on that. Do you mind if we create our own admin access as well? Just because trying to remember the password and everything. I know you have the link, but just in case we don't have access to that email, do you mind if we create our own admin?
Actually, can you start that question over? You kind of broke up.
Okay, I'm sorry. No, I was wondering, I know you have the site host admin that you created. Do you mind if we create our own admin, like our own personalized one, as the tournament director?
I would prefer you not.
Okay.
There's been one username and password issued to every district manager. The district manager is the individual that's been identified at least 2 years ago as the first point of contact for all 16 district tournaments. Each of those individuals have been emailed a username and password that links specifically and uniquely to only their district tournament. That should be the only username or password that's used for accessing each district tournament of all 16.
Well, I have that one. I just don't have that much RAM to remember it, so I'll write it.
Understood.
And those are randomly generated, so I know a lot of them don't make a lot of sense. So I'll apologize to all of you. They're randomly generated. But most of you are only seeing the site host. I'm logged in as us, and obviously the state office has one too, which I won't show you any more than that. But all right, so Class 4, District 4, when we're done here, I'm going to come and reset your tournament too, so you'll be back up to speed. So I'll get everybody out of here. You'll be back to all your unknowns. So if you're still listening along, I will. If, for whatever reason, it's tomorrow morning and you're in here and you don't see that I've done that, it's only because I forgot when we hung up the phone and remind me, if you want to remind us through the tickets. But I'll try and do that right away.
Shane, one last item, and after you address this, we can just all exit off the webinar and the conference this evening. Shane, do you want to let the district managers know, since we kind of have their attention right now, or the individuals operating track wrestling at each district site? Just want to advise them that this has the webinar tonight has been recorded, and what's the best way for them to access that to review if they have an interest in doing so?
You bet. So what I'll do is that this is recorded. I'll render it overnight, and then what I'll do is send a link out to everybody tomorrow, just like we've been communicating with the site hosts. I'll send that out in a quick email tomorrow. You'll be able to, use that. Greg, if you need that, I'll try and remember to email it to you directly. That way, if you need to get it to anybody else that, maybe might be requesting that. But it'll be a recorded version of this that you guys can watch and review, and it was so much fun. I'm sure you'll probably be watching it from here till your district. So.
And just so everyone knows, that email that he's referring to will be sent to the district manager. So if you're an individual that's basically hired to run the track wrestling program, make sure to get with the individual who is the district manager to get access to that recorded webinar version. That's going to be all for this evening. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Good luck at districts, and give me a call if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.